Today we're going to talk about a misconception that's brought up to me all the time. Hey, it's Don. Today we're going to talk about something that's been brought up to me I don't know how many times. I just got in a conversation with somebody else after they watched a video on another channel. Now, the conversation was talking about click-through rates, sell-through rates, and how important a lot of those figures and numbers are on eBay. No caveats were made. It just is a standard. Everybody should be paying attention to those numbers, and that's all they were worried about. Now, that's a misconception in my book. Any day of the week, that's a misconception. It depends on what you sell. There's no other way around that answer. If somebody's telling you that matters 100% of the time, they're totally off on that because, again, it comes down to what you're selling. Now, let's do a couple comparisons. Let's do an analogy of a couple things here. Now, let's say somebody's looking to buy a pair of jeans, a pair of Tommy jeans or something specifically, size 32 men's. So let's say they want to buy this pair and they're going to a brick and mortar store that sells Tommy clothing. You already automatically know that chances are they're going to buy it if they have their cut, whether it's slim, boot cut, or whatever type that they want, regardless. So every person that goes into a store that sells only a specific brand or it's selling something specific is already in the market for those items. So let's compare a brick and mortar like that to eBay. How would that relate to eBay? Now that should give you an impression every time somebody looks for that specific type of jeans in a search. Now you're going to have a ton of competition in that category. There could be hundreds of people, even 1,000 or more, selling that very same size of jeans. There's hundreds of stores across the country that sell that exact size, cut, whatever you may be looking for. They're fairly common. So your impression should be based on who's looking for that, and it should be matching the amount of people looking for that specific item. Now, with this case, with all the competition you have, you do want a high click-through rate, meaning they show up in an impression and then they click on the listing, as you also want a high sell-through rate, meaning you're selling those pairs of jeans over other people selling that very same size of jeans. Obviously, you want that in a flooded category. Now, let's look at this from an antique side of the market here. So let's say there's somebody who's a postcard collector, and they go into antique mall hoping to find postcards, which is the way most people used to find postcards before online was here. You'd have to randomly look around. Now, that person definitely wants to buy postcards, but you may not have the exact thing he's looking for. There could be hundreds of postcards just in the same genre. Let's say he's collecting postcards from Chicago or a specific city. So he's trying to get a set. There could be hundreds of postcards in there from Chicago, but not one he's interested in. So there's no way to judge that an impression would lead you to a sale because, again, they're limited markets. There may only be 2 of a certain postcard that this gentleman is looking for if we relate this to an online search. So he may still show up with a ton of impressions for a Chicago vintage postcard, but for his specific postcard, he may have a horrible click-through rate because they can tell by the image looking at it from the gallery view that no, that's not what he's looking for. His sell-through rate will be horrible. So are those numbers important in the antique side of this, the collectible side? And the answer is no, because the right person has to be on. Now let's take this one step farther. Let's do a call out to Don, Primetime Treasure Hunter, big comic book collector, great channel and does a lot on comic books. So let's say I'm looking for a vintage Silver Age Spider-Man comic book. I'm going to type in Spider-Man, and to eliminate all the junk, I'm going to use item specific to narrow it down just to Silver Age comics, because that's what I'm looking for. Now, I may show up if he's just looking for Spider-Man comics in general with a ton of impressions, but I may not have a high sell-through rate or a click-through rate because, again, that person may only want a specific issue, but is just out there looking to see what else is available. Now, with this example, too, that person may already have a specific comic book, but may run across one just randomly that's higher grade or slabbed or something, PSA graded, and he'll want that one over the copy he has now because it's an upgrade to him. Some people also may not have the money to do that and will take a lesser grade. So even if somebody is looking for your specific comic book, it's going to come down to other factors as to whether you will get a high click-through rate or a high sell-through rate. And with those, they're not replenishable, so it's only a one-time thing that you sell it. It's only going to be sold once. You're not going to have multiples of those in there either. So again, with clothing, you can buy in multiples. You can sell multiples. You can buy them wholesale and bulk lots as well. So there are two different ways to look at this. Sell-through rate doesn't matter to me at all with any of the vintage. But if I'm in a flooded category, yes, I want to sell it more so than the other ones. Because if I'm not selling, it means that my product is sitting there when others are selling the exact same item. You know, so those rates aren't important if you're selling certain things. The way a antique mall works is they don't assume they're going to get a sale. They have to have the right item in their store for somebody to want it. And that's exactly how eBay is to collectibles right this very second. It's the same exact principle works. I have to have the right person on. Most of the items that we sell have a limited market. There's enough people out there to buy them. There's enough interest out there, but it takes time. They may invest certain money into finishing off one set before they move on to another set. If it's, say, a card or a comic book or something like that. And condition is everything. But with clothing, you're expecting it to be in a certain specific condition every time. You can't settle for something with holes in it or damage to it if you want to wear a nice pair of jeans. So again, they're two different examples. They do not compare to each other. They are not like to likes. You cannot judge all your items on click rates, sell-through rates, impressions, and page views. It just doesn't work that way in the real world. Again, if you're in a flooded category, you do need to watch those items. As I said, a specific pair of jeans, they may have made a couple 100,000 of that exact size of jeans. Comic books or vintage collectibles, there's minuscule amounts compared to new jeans or even vintage jeans left these days because of the quality or the material it's possibly made out of. A scratched record would be a good example. A 78 record which just doesn't survive would be another great example. Pretty much anything in the collectibles, antiques markets isn't going to fall into those sections where click-through rate, sell-through rate is important. So anybody telling you that it's just this way for a sell-through rate or click-through rate doesn't understand how different markets and niche markets work to begin with. They're only centered in on what they're doing and not looking at the broad range on how it works for other people. Now, there's a ton of other channels and resellers who spend a lot of time looking at those numbers and still don't get traction. The biggest thing I can tell you, aside from even messing with those numbers, is having the best possible items up. It doesn't matter what you're selling as long as it's a good item and has potential to sell. Now, I'm in a different boat than most people out here. Most people have to source, have to list, have to pack, and have to do all the paperwork themselves if you're a one-person operation. So you need to buy the best possible items you can get. That may mean passing up on cheaper stuff that's going to waste your time and not return enough money back to your bottom line. Now, for me, I can list cheaper items because they will sell potentially at some point either way. I can afford to do that as well because I do have staff. I have people that can list for me. I even have people that can source, pack up, and do the paperwork. We have accountants and things like that as well. So again, it all depends on where you're at. So if you're wasting time on comparing numbers and categories that it may not mean a thing in, you're losing money to begin with. You can't guarantee anything vintage is going to sell at any specific time. They always come down, or almost always come down to, obviously, having the right person on at the right time. One more example here, and we'll relate it to comic books one more time. Let's say you have a Superman Comics #1. Very highly sought after comic book. Not a lot of them around. And it's going to get a ton of impressions. It will also get a ton of page views, but may not get a sale at all. It just depends on the price on it. Again, people price things high in certain categories. It works great in some categories, and it doesn't work great in other categories. There's a set limit people will pay for certain items. Not only is there a set limit, but the people actually looking at that listing may just admire that specific item. It's well sought after. It's the same item that you'll see pictured in comic book price guides, books, table books, and everything else like that when they're talking about key issues or neat comic books. So there's going to be a ton of interest. There won't be a ton of people that may be able to afford it, though. That is the issue. Or the condition may be an issue. The high-end collectors who could afford to buy that may only want to collect conditions that are higher than that comic book. So again, those numbers aren't comparable to items like that. And that is the majority of what we show and share with what we sell. Now, we do sell flooded item categories and things like that. The only way to beat those markets is to have the best possible item, the best possible feedback, the best possible photo, and using the super best SEO keywords you can find for that item. And with jeans, for example, there's again a specific amount someone's going to pay for a pair of jeans from you or anybody else. Most people know what a Tommy pair of jeans costs brand new at the store. Most people can look those up in a matter of moments to find out. So, you know, there is some play and stuff like that. That's another reason why clothing sellers do need to do promoted listings for the most part, to stand above everybody else just that little bit of space. And that's another reason why people may pay for bold or something like that, trying to stand out a little bit more. You got to do it in some categories, just like you do need to track click-through rate, sell-through rate, how many impressions you're getting versus, you know, page views. That's basically your click-through rate. Sell-through rate is obviously the amount of items you have up versus how many you're selling. Now, sell-through rate in general for an overall store is another one of those things that's a misconception. If you're selling in 10 different categories, you don't compare your whole store sell-through rate because each category can have a different sell-through rate. So I'm comparing like items to like items and not apples to oranges like you would for an overall store sell-through rate. Some items I list sell within the first day every single time I list them, while others may take 6 months, a year, even 2 years, but they always seem to sell. So again, I'm not worried about a sell-through rate. The biggest thing with the way I run my business is I'm worried about my bottom line. If my bottom line is continually going up, again, bottom line is after all my expenses, after I pay labor, after I pay cost of goods and the whole works. COGS are out of the way. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the bottom line, my profit line at the end of the day. If that's rising, I'm not even paying attention to my sell-through rate again because my numbers are telling me where my business is going. I don't need to worry about that, nor do I need to spend the time on that. Again, if you're selling different items, yes, pay attention to that. Look into it and see where you're going with your business. Again, it's important that way. Don't race to the bottom thinking you're going to have to do that just to sell your items. Improve your images, improve your title, keyword, and pay very close attention to your price. A simple markdown or something can net you a sale, as can offers to watchers. You don't always necessarily have to do what the rest of the pack is doing. There are other ways to sell those items that are in flooded categories. But the bottom line is it's a total, complete misconception if you think that the sell-through rate and click-through rate in every single item on eBay means the same thing. It just simply doesn't. It all comes down to what you sell, how you market it yourself, how you title it, photo it, and the whole works. And as I said earlier, you have to have good items. I pass on stuff all the time that can make me money, just because I don't want to mess with certain aspects of certain things. It all just boils down to the differences between what you are selling, plain and simple. But that's what I have for you today. Hopefully that gave you some ideas, some thoughts on the matter. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.